The titles are set over what is first Art Deco of the period, followed by a different style depicting things from centuries ago, suggesting we've entered into some kind of old hall with frescoes or tapestries, until we then pull back out again, possibly suggesting the pulling of a creature of a different time into the present, or maybe because the guy who did this was weird. Don't discount that when it comes to this film. The guy who directs this film is weird. So once we've actually started, cards are placed up like old silent films to give us the background, that this is a thinly veiled revision of Dracula with just some name changes, and would be Murnau's defining film for its realistic depiction of vampires. To reiterate what I said in the background video, this isn't meant to be a documentary recreation of events. In Ed Wood, Bela Lugosi was portrayed with foul-mouthed hatred for Boris Karloff. It remains perhaps the most memorable aspect of the film, and no wonder that Martin Landau won an Oscar for it. But accounts say that that was an exaggeration of a publicity stunt based on nothing of the kind. In the same vein, they've decided, in keeping with the film's theme, to transform Murnau, who's reported to have been a very kind-hearted man, and give him an exaggerated Fritz Lang personality, the control-freak German director who dresses absurdly. His camera operator even calls him Herr Doctor, while they wear goggles and lab coats. So the thing to take away is this film is not history, it's myth. It's not the tale of Nosferatu's making, it's the legend of its making. Likewise, the leading lady, Greta, is grumbling over the theatrical roles that she's missing out on as they leave Berlin for the location shoots. She's the diva, and it's suggested that these two had rough sex. Again, mythology. Murnau was homosexual and had a man along during location filming who was likely his lover. And Grau, the producer, wants to know about the vampire already. When are we going to get to the title monster already?
So who's playing Count Dracula? Orlok.
His name is Shrek.
I don't know, a green vampire with a Scottish accent just doesn't work for me. He explains that this guy is from the Russian school, in other words, method acting, and describes Shrek being in makeup and in character the entire time. The Russian school wasn't quite what is currently thought of as method acting, but the implication of the film is that Shrek is one of the modern method actors. The reason for this is twofold. First, it provides cover for the vampire playing a vampire. And second, it's part of the commentary on the cinematic war of egos that the film's theme is about. Method acting is a complicated topic, and to see that, you need only look at the man who played the Joker compared to the man who played the Joker. The first, one end of the method spectrum, was Heath Ledger, who locked himself away for a month to intensely get into the character's head through a diary and experimenting with voices. This led to a performance that earned him an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor. At the other end, you have people like Jared Leto, who mailed horrible things to his co-stars on Suicide Squad, including, among other claims, a pig fetus. And as our control group, Joaquin Phoenix is not a method actor. He played the Joker and won an Academy Award for Best Actor. 2 out of 3 Jokers show that method acting isn't required to make you a good actor, but it doesn't mean that you're not a good actor either. To explain what is meant, Stanislavski is the Russian being referred to, whose theory of acting was that an actor needed to gain emotional identification with a part. When Stanislavski's company did a performance in New York, Lee Strasberg, who was in the audience, was so impressed by it, they learned how it was done and modified it for American culture. The concept of Strasberg's method acting has thus led to the idea that experiencing something and recalling that experience makes for better acting, because you're conveying emotions that you are intimately familiar with. Usually this will be taken a step further by method actors into trying to mentally remain inside of the character. This can involve things like physicality. Robert De Niro, for instance, is a method actor who put on weight or took weight off depending upon the role to help get into the character. Others can be insistent on little things, like only being referred to by the character's name and not their own, even when the camera wasn't on, such as Peter Weller on RoboCop. Or of keeping up part of the performance regardless, like Meryl Streep during the Margaret Thatcher film The Iron Lady, although in her case it was purely practical, as it ensured that she didn't lose the accent and then have to find it again. Now keep in mind that actors are the ones who by and large are creating this film. Nicolas Cage himself is a method actor, but there are things that he won't do. He won't do things harmful to his health for the sake of his craft, unlike other method actors, and I'd like to reiterate that point. This man thinks it's too crazy to try some of the things other method actors do. So when we talk about method actors in this context, we're not discussing all method actors, and we don't necessarily have to consider fictional Shrek as method alone. Edward Norton is one example of a non-method actor that is considered difficult to work with. But the film goes that way because method actors have a greater potential towards this problem. Note the key differences between Heath Ledger and Jared Leto's method acting. Ledger crawled into his own head to find his place. Leto screwed with the heads of his fellow actors. And therein lies the problem. Every actor wants to give their best performance, but some actors care solely about their own performance alone. Hence why some of their colleagues view all method actors with labels like narcissistic or the go-to method when playing an asshole. Dustin Hoffman's two most notable method acting moments are as follows. One, during Kramer vs. Kramer, he tried to deliberately antagonize Meryl Streep between takes, including insulting her recently dead husband and at one point slapping her, all to supposedly enhance the performance. The other is when the legendary Sir Laurence Olivier, during a scene with Hoffman when the actor was intentionally sleep-deprived, "My dear boy, why don't you just try acting?" I realize it seems like I've completely gone off the rails here, but this is an essential thing to understand about the film. Fictional Max Shrek is meant to represent the Jared Leto school of method acting, those who immerse themselves in the role to the point of intentionally unsettling the cast and crew, and also are unrealistically demanding and selfish. And amusingly, in hindsight, as Leto is notorious for employing this selfish form of method acting, and his most famous recent role is actually playing a vampire. This film is made by people who work with lots and lots of actors and directors, and there's a bit of exorcism taking place in this film. Murnau is then the other shoe being dropped. He keeps everyone in the dark about as much as possible, and on the train ride is his pretentious monologue about the enormity of what they do. Fictional Murnau is the demanding perfectionist director. He's a James Cameron who insists his actors hold their breath underwater for long periods of time because only then will it look right. He's David Fincher making his crew stay into the wee hours of the night until he is completely satisfied he has shot just the right image of a bar of soap. He's Oliver Stone nearly murdering James Woods using a blank cartridge on Salvador, regardless of the fact that blanks can and have killed people, because it's better for the shot. Murnau is the picture of what Nicholas Barber, writing for the BBC, was exploring with his question, are the best directors tyrants?
We are scientists engaged in the creation of memory. But our memory will neither blur nor fade.
So the film sets up the irresistible force and the immovable object, the obsessive, perfectionist, egomaniac director, and the self-indulgent, narcissistic star. Sometimes the two can cooperate, like when Murnau leaves Shrek a weasel or something to enjoy. Although sometimes that's worse, as the director is then enabling the bad behavior of the star, like, say, whatever he's doing to that weasel. But Murnau is busy shooting Gustav, the actor who portrayed the hapless Hutter. Gustav is played by Eddie Izzard. Because Gustav is a man, I'll be referring to the character as such. Murnau here would just as likely refer to Gustav as it for all he cares. He is not a person at this moment. Gustav is only a brush for his canvas that must do as it's told.
I am sorry.
Albin! And Albin, a native, has wandered into my frame.
You can just feel the human warmth oozing off him, can't you? After we've done with a few more, it's time for the shots at the castle. Nosferatu was entirely shot day for night, with the frames painted blue to indicate the night scenes. But the scenes that will involve the actual Count Orlok must be shot at night in this fictional tale, because obviously the daylight would destroy the vampire, and we wouldn't have much of a movie, would we? The trouble with these prima donnas always turning into piles of dust on you. Gustav is shot doing a few approaches until finally he, along with us, meet Count Orlok, arriving slowly. Defoe's performance, of course, is outstanding, but I do want to take a moment to praise Izzard, who is playing an actor playing a part while in the silent movie era. So there are several levels required for the performance, and Izzard very effectively conveys the layers of Gustav acting and Gustav's own trepidations, and with the need to both perform things with a minimalism while carrying subtlety so it doesn't go over the top into pantomime. I realize it probably seems silly, but I think this is Izzard's finest performance in the entire film. And there's not even a single line. Of course, while Gustav gets some praise from his director, everyone else is floored by Shrek. Until we find out that something happened to Wolfgang, who's found lying on the floor after following Shrek inside. And Murnau just brushes it off. I've got bigger concerns than my leading man eating the cinematographer. The next day, when it's time to film the contract scene, Shrek shows up breathing like an animal. So Murnau just assures everyone that in time, they'll all appreciate his artistry, if not his charisma. So, time to shoot.
I'd like some makeup.
Well, you don't get any. All right. Are we ready to begin?
Shrek stumbles his way through the shoot, but Murnau is satisfied at his creeping everyone out, until the part when the locket comes out, leading to the classic moment in the film when the card reveals that he says, "She has a lovely neck," to speak of how he wants to suck the blood from it.
Who is this woman?
This is Ellen, my wife.
She has a beautiful bosom.
Well, I suppose he can suck there first if he wants. Shrek improvises about them being neighbors, which Gustav can easily play off because who would want to see that through the neighbor's window, naked on his way to the bathroom while scratching himself with those 6-inch nails? Ugh. Earlier they'd found a large flask filled with what looked like blood in the supplies, and now in the night Murnau brings it to the cave where Shrek waits. It's moments like these when the horror and the vampire aspects of the film are most pronounced, as Shrek reflects upon the change of his fortunes, from golden chalices to drop by drop, like the way an old man pees, he says. We never see nor hear Murnau in this scene. This is all of Shrek in his isolation and timelessness, as if the statue of Ozymandias were revealed to be the broken man himself. Perhaps knowing this, in the scene the next night, when Gustav's character is eating and the Count is reading his papers, Murnau purposefully shocks Gustav into cutting his thumb with the bread knife, knowing that Shrek won't be able to resist. After first sucking blood from the thumb, he again goes after Wolfgang when the lights are out. Murnau shows where his priorities lie.
You lunatic, that is what is the matter with
I
him.
have contracted you in secrecy and at great expense. You will not damage this production.
Another 3 incidents like this and the Union will definitely hear about it. While Shrek amuses himself looking at film of daylight, Murnau deals with a borderline uprising, since Wolfgang is not going to be able to finish the film, and, oh yes, the man playing the title character is a lunatic. Murnau plans to fly out a replacement for Wolfgang, but first, he goes to Shrek to express his outrage at this unconscionable disruption of his film.
Why him, you monster? Why not the script girl?
The script girl. I'll eat her later.
This is the film's central theme at its most overt. The raging director dealing with the self-indulgent star who tries to get just one member of the crew to pick off while Murnau is away. You know, like the writer. And to say that he won't sail despite the number of scenes that take place on a ship. Murnau threatens the actor with the gravest attack upon his ego possible, There will be no close-ups because he'll be replaced with a double. Because that's at the heart of this kind of actor, the kind that Shrek is representing, at their ridiculous demands and petty firings and temper tantrums and insistence on indulgence of what they feel they need to act, even at the expense of others. In the end, it's all about ego. They are represented by a vampire here because they feed on the lifeblood of others. They sap at the will and the happiness of others to sate their hunger for their narcissism. Still, the film interweaves the vampire and the allegory together effectively.
You will leave my people alone.
Or else what?
Don't think I can't harm you.
Tell me how you would harm me. And even I don't know how I could harm myself.
After Murnau leaves, he gives a quiet monologue about what he's lost. There's several reasons for the title. The shadow represents the unnatural creature's power, as I've said before. And the most striking images of Nosferatu are of the shadows that the monster casts. Yet it also is the fact that our vampire is but a shadow of the powerful creature he once was. This point is soon revisited. While Murnau is gone, to save time, he has a replica of the ship built so they can shoot Shrek's scenes on dry land. During this time, Grau and the writer get a little drunk and decide to test how deeply Shrek's mind has crawled into this character by asking him some questions. Shrek provides little. He's so old he can't recall the long centuries ago anymore, but he does comment on the book Dracula, making him sad for much the same reason, describing what it must have been like for Dracula, who once had servants and armies, to not only have to do all of those human things for the guest himself, but to try to remember those human things after centuries of not being human. It's a reminder of all that has been lost, both of glory and perhaps in a way of humanity. Excellent example. On seeing this and hearing the insane rambling of the now half-drunk vampire, they reach the obvious conclusion: this is one of the greatest actors who has ever lived. After Shrek helps himself to someone working on the boat, we see that Fritz, the new cinematographer, arrives by biplane and somewhat drunk.
Wer darfst du festkommen? Oh, look!
Did you get the shot?
Yes, sir.
And the gate is clean?
The gate's clean, sir.
But at last the picture can get back underway. After seeing Shrek lying in repose for the coffin scene, Fritz speaks with him about Plato, to bring us to another reason for the shadows of the title, the allegory of the cave. Plato's allegory is of prisoners in a cave, unable to turn their heads, only to watch a wall illuminated by a fire with puppeteers behind them, and they can only see the shadows. Because that is all they can see, they presume the shadows are reality, yet the shadows are but illusion. While the purpose of the allegory is to explain Plato's views regarding perfected forms, the so-called Platonic ideal, the point being made here is about the fact that the camera appears to create reality in much the same way for its audience. It's also a meta-concept. As I've been saying, there is no attempt at all to make this the tale of the filming of Nosferatu. This is a mythical reimagining with fictitious representations of real people. Shadow of the Vampire is an illusionary telling of the true events and people that made this film. By the time they get to Wismar, Greta arrives, along with the announcement that members of the production keep disappearing. But with her here and Shrek here, the clash of wills comes to blows as one monster tries throttling another, until Murnau realizes what he's done, and Shrek is only amused. We can only guess as to why he tolerates Murnau's demands. We know it's so he can drink Greta's blood, that much is overt, but during his drunken recollections, Shrek mentions something about a woman long, long ago, seemingly tied with his vampirism, and also someone that he misses. He can no longer even recall her face. Greta, we can presume, is probably the fulfillment of a long desire of connection to that woman, one way or another, even if it is to snuff out her life. The writer brings Grau, Fritz, and Greta to Shrek's coffin, arguing that Murnau's obsession with realism is at work here. He insists on using a real castle. He insists on using real peasants. He would use a real vampire if there was one, and that is Shrek. Well, no one believes him, of course, but we soon see Shrek stalking the night. But he doesn't get anyone just yet. Everyone is first roused by the cries of Greta. She's just lying in bed making sounds of ecstasy with her, beautiful bosom fully revealed. She's been taking morphine, and Fritz has to just cover for that, unaware that Shrek is stalking these halls tonight. Although he is visible, his shadow is frequently seen before he actually arrives. Well, we're finally on the island for the moment of truth, and while Fritz and Grau set up and Murnau gets himself high on drugs himself, Shrek explores the set and discovers a lever that will open the place up to allow in the sunlight, and he knows what this is for. The pair go to find Murnau, symbols carved all over his walls, including a swastika, and he confesses to them that it's all true. There's no Max Shrek, just a creature Murnau discovered thanks to something he read as a student.
Why? What did you offer him in return?
Everlasting life. And Greta.
That's a beautiful concept. Shrek doesn't have everlasting life. He only has endless, empty existence. But through the film, he will be alive to the world forever. 90 years later, and we still watch him. Know him so well, his silhouette is unmistakable.
Greta, how could you do this, Friedrich?
I did it for science.
You know, I am something of a scientist myself. They have to go forward with the shoot. There's no way off the island. But we can guess that Shrek has been picking off members of the crew. Fritz and Grau seem to be the only ones stuck here trying to finish it. Greta has no idea that she's about to appear in a snuff film if things go wrong. They give her a wooden stake to finish off the vampire, but her indifference turns to horror the moment that she spots that Shrek casts no reflection in the mirror, and the trio hold her down and give her the same drugs they'd used to calm the cat at the beginning of this film, to leave her helpless before the monster. Shrek performs his death scene, but he can't wait any longer and demands to shoot the feasting scene. There's a sexual element added to this to imply the connection, as I said, between Greta and this woman out of Shrek's past, because as he feasts on her blood, he fondles her right breast the entire time. Yeah, always falling asleep when it's over. Typical. Actually, by drugging Greta, they've now drugged Shrek, so they can shoot his real death scene with the sun. Except...
Wait a minute! He got the chain!
You've got to get up pretty early in the morning to fool a vampire, although that probably goes without saying. Fritz tries to shoot him and gets a broken neck for his troubles. Grau goes for the stake and is strangled. And all the while, Murnau just keeps filming. And when done, is only concerned that the composition isn't right and Shrek needs to return to his mark. Considering that means drinking from the lovely Greta, he acquiesces. But that is his undoing, because men arrive to open that door and let in the sun. Shrek is destroyed, symbolized by his film breaking. And all Murnau wants of them now is to hold up the end board to complete his scene and his picture. Leaving aside everything else, Shadow of the Vampire has actors I like, having room to explore the space. John Malkovich and his petulant, selfish need to make his perfect film no matter who has to pay. Willem Dafoe's vampire that shows that a vampire probably needs psychotherapy as he weaves between impish selfishness, morose memories, and forceful demands. Kerry Yules is just this side of Blackadder's Flashheart in some ways and a practical man in others. His drunken use of a handgun during shooting sets up why he has a weapon to try and kill the vampire, even if it is ineffective. Udo Kier delights as always, turning what I saw as the nuttiest member of the real-life production into the sane center of the piece. And Eddie Izzard plays against type as the put-upon small-time actor who is Murnau's plaything. And lest we forget Catherine McCormick, who walks a tightrope to give us this selfish star that nevertheless we can feel sorry for given what's being done to her, as if placed upon an altar to be sacrificed in the name of this picture. Now add to that the great premise, the dark humor, the themes. This is a really enjoyable and sadly underappreciated piece.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
I don't expect you to understand this, and I am loath to admit it myself. But the writer is necessary,